Hey guys, it's Taylor. Today's episode of Fearless Unscripted is going to be a fun one. So I recently discovered this podcast that's called Every Widow Thing, and it has become part of my daily listening routine. And I'm really, really excited to have on Holly and Whitney. Hey, you guys.
Hi. I love that you said it was going to be fun and it's about widows. But you're absolutely right.
Well, I think that you two capture, or in the intro of the show, you capture it really perfectly when you say, welcome into our widow circle where trauma meets humor, and we remind you that you can not only survive, but thrive.
Yes,
Did I nail
right.
it?
You nailed it.
I think that this is something that, well, I'm really excited to talk to you guys because I think that you do something that's really important for widows, but for people just who have lost somebody. And I think you provide this sort of just refreshing take on something that's really, really hard. Tell me, when you guys get together, you and Kira and Lacey, the other two podcast hosts, when you sit down and you start talking about this, how do you come up with the topics that you discuss on the podcast?
We'll be in a conversation and we'll just start talking about something, and we're like,
we need to record this.
That would be a good show. Just random topics, things that have happened in our lives.
Obviously, we've been living with this grief as widows, and so once the four of us got together, we really started talking about the things that we were thinking when we were first widows, or the issues that we've been having since becoming a widow, and we just realized that if the four of us, who are all very different, are feeling that, then there has to be a very large audience out there feeling the same way. And we were lucky enough to have found a group,
right?
But not everybody has that group available to them. So we wanted to become that group for them.
Yes,
and now we have a following.
It sounds, I mean, when you listen, it literally sounds like what you're describing, Holly, is, a couple of friends just sitting together and just talking about life. And when you listen, you just feel really brought into that in a natural and organic way. And I think that sometimes is hard to do, but you do it really, really, really well. So kudos to you guys and the work that you're doing with this podcast.
Thank you. It's been very much out of my comfort zone. So
Whitney
brought it out.
Holly was very quiet. She's always been very quiet and kind of reserved.
I wouldn't say reserved.
Okay, reserved is the wrong word. Quiet, a little shyer, doesn't need to be the center of attention. So it's been
That's
awesome.
not like me. I don't identify with that.
I cannot relate. But it's been awesome to see her blossom during we've been doing it now for over a year. And out of the four of us, I feel like she has come into her own more so than the rest of us, which has been really cool to see. And one of the just bonuses of doing it that we hadn't really considered.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I texted Holly last week, and Whitney, you'll appreciate this. I told her every single time that I listen to an episode of the podcast, there's 1,000 things that I want to talk to you guys about, that I want to text Holly about and just tell her oh my gosh, you hit it. You guys got it. You hit it the nail on the head when you said this, or when you brought up this thing. And, I love that. And that made getting ready for this episode of Fearless Unscripted really challenging, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pare down all the things that I want to talk about? But I wonder if we could maybe start at sort of the beginning, maybe for you, Holly. I want you to kind of tell us your sort of Texas Tech story. How did you find yourself in Lubbock?
Wow. And I'm representing today in my Texas Tech
love it.
shirt.
I am also representing in red.
Whitney, we will claim you for this
Guns
podcast. Yeah, I love it.
Oh, wow. Well, I came to Texas Tech. I was looking for, I had to stay in Texas, and I felt
You got to stay in Texas.
Mom and dad's
yes,
rules?
I got to say that again.
Were those mom and dad's rules that you had to stay in Texas?
Yes. I think OU was a choice, and I was like, no. So, good choice. I chose Texas Tech because it was far enough away, yet close enough. And I met with my advisor, not really knowing what I wanted to do. but I am creative. So he recommended graphic design, and that's what I did. And I met Toby in the design building.
You saw each other in the hallways?
We saw each
and
other.
It was love
we
at
did,
first sight,
because he was a few years older, and we did see each other in the hall.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. So my friend Kimber, that was my dear friend that we met in the dorms, she was the loud one. She was the Whitney. And she introduced us, or she made the introduction. So,
do you remember where you went on your first date in Lubbock?
He took me to, he invited me to go to a jazz concert that was on campus. And I can't remember. I feel like it was Wynton Marsalis, but could that have been like possible? I don't know. Or maybe it was, anyway.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that it was on campus, though. It's classy.
Well, tell them
good.
what you did on campus, your on-campus job. I feel like you could have met Toby that way too, but instead it was in the halls. Mm-hmm. But when you were
that
the
was later.
photographer.
That was later.
Oh.
That was after we had already met. Yeah,
well, but still.
That was when I was older.
Yeah, but it was at Tech. It was a cool job.
Yeah.
So you guys started dating in college, you get married, and then did you move back to Austin immediately, or what was the story there?
We went out to California. Obviously, he graduated in graphic design as well, and he always wanted to move to San Francisco and work for a famous designer, Primo Angeli, and he followed his dream, and I followed him out there.
You followed your dream.
So we lived in San Francisco for 15 years in the Bay Area. We both lived with friends for a couple of years and then got married and bought a house and lived up in Marin County. And then after 15 years having babies, I was pregnant with my youngest, Zach, and we were ready to get back to Texas because wanted to be closer to family with kids and everything. So we packed up and moved back to Texas and picked Austin.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love it. Austin's it's okay. It's fine. I mean, apart from that whole UT thing.
I am not a Longhorn fan.
You guys, both of you, and then Kira and Lacey, you in the podcast, you each have episodes where you go in and you sort of tell your own story of grief, your own journey to where you are today, and the journey of losing your person. And I'm curious to know, I want for people to, I don't want to get too much into it because I'd really like for people to go and listen to the podcast. And so you can actually find the link to the podcast in our show notes here. And so go back and listen to all of the stories from the host. But I want for you to kind of tell me, when you lost Toby, was Whitney part of your life? Did you know Kira and Lacey at that time, or were they sort of people that came along in this next sort of season of your life?
They came along after. I met Lacey about a week after she came over. We had a mutual friend. I have no idea what we talked about, but it felt comforting to have this beautiful friend or beautiful woman. And I'm like, oh, wow, she's got it together. It gave me hope. I did know of Kira. I didn't know her personally, but I knew her story because we were in the same community. So she reached out to me about 5 or 6 months after Toby died. She knew the timing was right and it was perfect, and we got together and talked for hours and obviously became friends and had a lot in common because we have similar stories, how we lost our husbands. And then Whitney and I met around the same time. I think it was 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, because my husband died about 6 months after you.
Right.
After Toby.
Right.
Yeah.
So the middle school counselor reached out to me and asked me, told me about Whitney, and asked me if she could give my number to her. And Whitney called me and was like, "Can we go to coffee? I want to see you right now."
Yeah. I was like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" Holly's like,
I was like, "I don't know how much help I'll be, but I'm happy to meet you." And I said, I'm going to probably be grubby in yoga pants. And she said, "Probably the same."
Yeah. Not a lot of showering going on right then at that point. But I knew from the very beginning that in order for me to move through this trauma of losing my husband suddenly, I needed to find women who were a little bit farther along than I was, that I felt were doing it right, you know. And we talk a lot on the podcast about how there is no right answer, there are no rules. But in that moment, I was like, who looks like they are thriving? Who looks like they have showered and their children seem to be fed, and, you know, there's laughter. And I just needed to find a group that kind of looked the way that I wanted to be as the months go by. And and I was lucky enough to hook up with Holly.
I feel the same.
Yeah.
Because people were like, "Oh, do you want to go to this grief group?" I mean, not asking me to go with them, just suggesting these different groups. And I was like, I don't want to go in a room and hear people cry. I mean, that sounds kind of mean in a way, but
you had to protect yourself.
I wanted to like get out of my house, and I wanted to smile. I wanted to get away.
We also realized that we were in a very unique group of young widows with young children, and also sudden death. All of those things were making us very unique, whereas there were a lot of groups and support for people who had lost their partner to cancer or, you know, something, a long-term illness. There seemed to be more support for that, and obviously that was not our experience. So to find other people that had that sudden death experience with young children, it's like a unicorn, you know,
common bond.
Yeah, it's hard to find. So we feel very, very lucky.
Yeah. And Whitney, what you did in getting that number and actually calling Holly is something that I think a lot of people, that's like they would stop before even getting to that point.
Right.
And I think that that's so unfortunate, because what that did for you is it provided so much momentum. And now look at not only the relationships that you've been able to develop, but the thing that you've done with this podcast that's been able to kind of like make other women, other widows, other people who have lost somebody feel really known and really seen and felt. And I just think about, like, if you hadn't taken that step and you hadn't have like done the hard thing, where you would be, where all of us would be if we didn't do that.
Right. Grief can be very isolating. And especially when you're at the very beginning of it, you don't have the energy to reach out to people. And that's one thing we talk about in the podcast is you need to make sure to ask for help, because it's very easy to isolate and people don't understand. So it's isolating. So yeah, you do have to make an effort to jump out of that comfort zone and make a connection. And we talk to a lot of widows that are having a hard time finding their group. And the encouragement that we try to give is don't stop trying. Keep finding different activities or avenues where you might meet people, but don't stop trying, because it is a lifesaver to have a support group.
And I think timing can be different. I mean, like you say, don't stop trying, because things could be different in 6 months or 3 months.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was unique in that I think I reached out to you like 2 weeks after my husband died.
Wow.
And was like, let's talk. Whereas some of the other women in our group have said they had zero desire to reach out to anyone.
Lacey was very, she didn't want to leave her house, but her son was 6, a lot younger. And I don't know, everybody handles it different.
That's what I love about our podcast, is that we are 4 very different people. So if you listen in, the chances of you hearing a point of view that's similar to yours is pretty good, you know?
Yeah, and that's kind
I
of the
love
point.
that.
Like, we want to be able to relate, somebody to relate to one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Holly, when you and I talked on the phone for the first time and I asked if you would be on this podcast, you said, I really think we bring Whitney in. And I felt like, having already listened to some of these episodes, I felt like that was really important for us to do and have Whitney on this Fearless Unscripted episode, because I felt like she really represented a season of life for you when you had started to kind of like turn a corner a bit. So it's really cool to hear Whitney, say that she has been able to watch and experience this just sort of like blossoming of you and your person, and being able to like share this super hard, very vulnerable thing. And I love that. I think that's really special.
Yeah, Toby was very much an extrovert. I always say he was the personality of the couple. So now I feel like, okay, it's my chance. I got to do something with this. And so,
yeah.
Do you feel almost like forced into that, and then you kind of like rose to the occasion and sort of like, sometimes when people put you in a position to have to do something, you go to a place in your heart and in your mind that you didn't maybe know that you were capable of? Is that sort of what you have learned in this sort of journey?
Yes, I had no idea I would be capable of this. If somebody had told me Toby's going to die, when you're 47, I would be like, well, I just will never survive. I had to survive. So,
and just like you said with the blossoming, she's not only surviving, but she truly is thriving. Do we wish our lives were with our husbands? Of course. But the person that Holly is becoming out of this trauma is so inspiring. And she continues to push herself out of her comfort zone. Like doing this podcast with you. It was hard enough to do it with just her little group, but to branch out.
I was like, can Whitney come on with me?
And you would have been fine by yourself. They're probably wishing that you were by yourself.
No, stop.
No.
No, I'm teasing. No, it's really, it's awesome.
Yeah, I do think that the relationship that you all have with each other really comes out, and it makes people, it's very disarming to people who are listening. It makes them feel like just really, like I said this earlier, it makes them feel really heard, really seen. It makes them feel really connected to you guys. And something that I've sort of been thinking about too is that when you're an audience member and you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing all of you talk about things that are so deeply personal and things that are so vulnerable, because it makes the audience feel closer to you. I wonder if, maybe when you meet people who listen to the podcast and they tell you, they're like so eager to kind of share maybe their grief experience. And I wonder if that ever gets heavy for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Like,
it does. There are, especially early on when we were telling our stories, it was kind of like being in a therapy session, going home and like, I just have to go home and lay down. But then, it's also so, like hearing from people and
validating.
their validation of like just DMing us or emailing us. I'm like, this makes me feel so good. And we're helping.
You definitely
people.
have to put up the boundaries. We can't be listening to everybody's story 24/7. That's what's so great about our Instagram. We can decide when to go and slide into the DMs and reach out and talk to people. We also set up a Facebook group called Every Widow Thing Insiders, where people can join and talk to each other. And be support for each other. And it's not just on us, because it can feel like a burden. You don't want to leave anybody unread. You want to make sure that they have been heard and try to give them some support. So we created the Facebook group so that they could do that.
Like even in their own cities or communities. Like we had, I think it was somebody in San Diego was like, oh, I'm in San Diego. And that was the purpose of creating the group, so they can support each other.
Yeah.
And find each other.
I know Lacey says too, because she was she's 13 years in now, but when we started this, she was 11. And she hadn't thought about the beginning. Like, she had to go back and relive a lot of early grief. And that really was difficult.
Heavy,
it was
very
heavy. Yeah.
And we hadn't all heard every detail of all of our stories, especially Lacey's and
None of us.
Kira's.
We didn't really talk about how our husbands died. When we got together, it was like a wine club, where we're laughing and talking. And
we
then,
wanted to have fun.
Right. And then organically, we would start talking and be like, oh, wait, you're having that issue too? So am I. Oh, wait, your child's doing that? So is mine. This is what helped me. This is how I've been coping. And it just naturally started becoming more of a grief group.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that in order to talk about the stuff that comes after trauma, for the sake of the podcast, you have to go there early. You have to kind of like establish and set the tone. And
absolutely.
That's something I hadn't even considered, what it would be like to be, 11 years out and to go back to that place.
Yeah.
I know that's hard.
It was difficult.
It felt good, though, telling my story. I mean, as weird as it sounds, it was kind of like getting it all out, and whoever wants to hear it can hear it. And a lot of people didn't know that he was hit head on by a drunk driver. That was never put out there anywhere. I mean, other than obviously my friends and family, but it's kind of like, I wanted the world to know he's hit by a drunk driver.
Yeah.
So.
Holly, you and I made this connection, or I made this connection with you. I think I told you this story when we talked on the phone, and I was listening to some of the early episodes, and I was listening to Holly's story, and she talks about March 2nd being the day that she lost her person. And that was the day that I lost my brother in 2023.
Wow.
And so
I didn't know that.
And it was just this I just remember, when I told you that, there was just this you just had this real compassion, and you just feel, I think that when you talk to people who have felt grief, for them to just say, oh, I know. I know. It just is so oddly comforting because it's so simple. What do you think that this journey has done for you? Do you think that it's made you, for both of you, has it made you more compassionate? Holly, we talked about how it's kind of brought you out of your shell, but I think in one of the episodes you guys talk about how, because of your own experience, you can identify grief in other people a lot quicker, sometimes without even them having to say anything. It's like a sixth sense almost.
Definitely more empathetic. And my boys, I think all of our children, all of us, are just more empathetic and
also feel strong. Like, we are, I'm not even gonna say went through it. You are gonna always go through it. Loss doesn't disappear. You're always gonna feel that person at some point, that they're missing something. Grief doesn't go away, but man, I feel strong that I have continue to get up and, move through the day, and I continue to laugh, and I watch my kids doing the same thing. And that's been, I don't know, I feel like I can take on anything. My attitude has changed as far as, if something bad happens, I'm like, okay, well, if something bad happens, it's not a dead husband, so I'll get through it,
Well, and it's made it easier to talk about dying and death. And it's so weird in our society that people are so scared to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've also had people ask me, what should I say? And I'm like, just say something. Gosh. I mean, say, I don't know what to say.
Yes.
Yeah, I had people that I didn't hear from because they didn't know what to say. And I remember
those people.
I remember those people.
You do.
Yeah.
And then I remember the people that, maybe just said something.
Yeah,
So.
acknowledging it in some way. I think that's one of the things that the podcast is doing, is trying to normalize grief. Everyone's going to feel it on some level. you're either going to lose a parent or a pet or a job or a relationship, a divorce, whatever. There's grief. That's one thing that I feel like I have been given because my husband died, is that realization that everyone, you hear it, oh, everyone's going through something. Everyone is going through something. Everyone really is. And I remember in the first couple of weeks, people being like, they didn't know, at the grocery store, they'd be like, have a great day. And I just was like, you know what?
Yes.
Yes, I was literally so furious about it. And so and they weren't doing anything wrong, but I just feel a better awareness of people are heavy. They're feeling things. If I get cut off on the freeway, I imagine that maybe they're rushing to the hospital to get to their dying loved one, Well,
and that's true. And I always tell myself that, and my boys, if they had an altercation with a friend or something, I'm like, maybe they're going through something and they don't want to talk about it. And they're like, yeah, you're right.
Basically, we're better people now than we were before.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Whitney, I have this like very visceral memory of, I was going to the Dollar Tree or the Dollar General, and I pull into the parking lot, and this couple like walks out, and they were laughing, and I just had this like totally irrational thought of being just mad at them, and you're just mad at people, like how dare the audacity of life to continue when I feel how I feel.
It is a very strange thing because, you think that everyone should just stop. And how can anybody be laughing right now? And how can anyone tell me to have a great day? Like, how dare you?
And you know that it's crazy that you feel like that. Yeah. You recognize like this is so not logical, but you just don't care. At that point I knew I can't feel like that about people, but you know what? I'm going to be in that right now. And then when I open my car door and get out, I'm just everything's going to be better. But
exactly.
Yeah, it is. Grief is weird in that way. Sometimes you just have to let yourself go there for a second. But Holly, you were talking about this. A lot of times people ask you, like, you've been through grief. Like, what do I say? And the thing that I tell people a lot is that you don't have, when they ask me that, like, you don't have the ability necessarily to make somebody feel better or worse about their situation. Like, they're already going to be mad and sad and upset. Like, they're already there. And so just say like, man, I don't know what to say, but sucks. I'm with you. Yeah. I'm available. I'm just going to make myself available to you.
Yeah.
Also, people are weird when it's like they don't want to bring up the Toby. Dead spouse or and I'm like, I'm thinking about him, so you may as well bring him up.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's better than pretending.
Yeah, I think people get so they get paralyzed by the words because they want to make you feel better. You're not going to make me feel better. My husband's dead. Unless you can bring him back, nothing you say is going to make me feel better.
But being there.
But acknowledging actually makes him, we've talked about this
feel
on the
validated.
podcast. Yes.
It validates
and
him.
I know you lost an important person, and that's got to be hard or whatever. And we have a whole episode on people are gross and the things that people say. And you sometimes, and I've even been one of those gross people trying to say something, that is helpful and end up being gross. But when I go back and I remember later, like in the moment I might be mad about it, but later I go back and I recognize, you know what, at least they said something. They were trying to be, they were trying to be available. They were trying to approach me, acknowledge. And those are those are important things to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You guys both have sons, right, that are out of the house and they're grown men and they're going to college and doing all the things.
Men. When are they grown? When are they grown?
Audience
50?
of Fearless
I'm
Unscripted.
Not sure.
What a journey it's been for you guys. And I love when we talked last time, you said, we're not empty nesters. You're what?
Free birds.
Yeah. We're free birds. Yeah. That's the thing that I always try to focus on is there's two sides to the coin, right? The positive and the negative. empty nesting, that sounds sad. My nest is empty and it's had these little birds in it for freaking 18 years and now it's empty. That sounds sad. And so apparently the new term now is free bird, and we've definitely embraced that. That feels better to say. So
How are you embracing that? What are the things that you guys are doing with your free bird time?
Well, Whitney and I are going on a bucket list
travel. Yeah.
In a week.
Yeah,
in
like in a week.
half.
We're headed to Greece. And we're going to live it up as free birds soaring through Athens and the Acropolis.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it's fun. That's something to look forward to, something to do.
Yeah, I
think
had
that's
to
something
plan
that's
something.
maybe one of the most important things is to be able to like identify the things in your future that you can look forward to.
Yes.
And not necessarily the things that are hard, not necessarily the things that, the next anniversary or the next holiday or whatever, but it's like the things that you're doing for yourself that like honor the person you're becoming because of this life experience that you've had. And I think it's really beautiful that you guys can, first of all, that you can do that, but second of all, that you can do that with people that you love.
Yeah.
It's special.
I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. Now, when I get my credit card bill,
right.
That's for down
There's
the road.
Definitely balance. You have
That's
to have
for
balance.
2025.
Right,
Holly.
right.
That's for come on.
Right. No, we're excited for the next chapter, and like we've learned through our grief that there is going to be a next chapter, and it can be amazing. So let's assume it's going to be amazing and move forward in it.
100%.
This is the sort of most important question, the hardest question. If there are women or people who are listening to this and they feel still overcome by their grief, what is the thing that you would, if they don't hear anything else of this, what is the thing you would want for them to know and learn and take away from our conversation, from the conversations that you have, just about life generally, but about the experience of overcoming and living with this grief?
I feel like for me, it's been very helpful for me to get out of my house, to exercise. I try to every day, and be in a group of people that I exercise with. I try to do other activities with friends, and I would like to volunteer. I just think being around people is very helpful. I started a part-time job recently because I just wanted to be around people, and I love it. I get to talk to people all day long. That's been very helpful for me. I would feel isolated being in my house. So, and also I have to have a project, like, what's my next project? What's my next endeavor? Whether it's redecorating my house or whatever that might be. And I love to be with my family and friends. So I don't know.
I would say one of the things that I would share with people is feel the feelings. Like you said earlier, you felt a certain way. It was irrational, but you let yourself feel it. You didn't necessarily act on it and punch someone in the face, but you felt it, and then you moved through it. And
you always, one of my therapists said, you have to feel it to heal it. So
yeah, I am great at trying to flip it immediately to the positive. And a therapist told me I had toxic positivity, which I didn't even know was a thing. But I would immediately, instead of sitting in the sad or the anger or whatever, I would try to immediately flip it around and be like, no, but I'm so blessed and look at all the great things. But that doesn't allow that feeling to move through me and out. It actually just pushed it down. So people are scared of their feelings, and they don't want to feel the deep grief. They don't want to feel the sadness. But if you don't, it's not going anywhere. You may push it down for years.
It'll always come.
But it's going to come up. Yeah.
I mean, even 7 years later,
Yeah.
it comes up. and you feel it, move through it, and then get out and do something.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would like to tell people who are grieving is that the pain that you feel right now is going to get, Lacey likes to say, less deep, less dark, less often. It feels very intense in the beginning, and there's a great analogy about a ball in a box, and the ball is very big in this box when you first have the loss.
And it gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah, and it doesn't, in the beginning, it's hitting the sides constantly, and that's super painful. But as your life gets bigger and moves forward, the ball gets smaller, and it's not hitting the side all the time. When it does hit the side, it can drop you to your knees, but it's not all the time. So just hold on. You're not going to feel this deeply forever. Yeah. And hope is a superpower. Yeah. So keep it.
Yeah. And I mean, it'll come up in phases like graduation, every phase of life, with your kids or yourself. Like, gosh, I wish they were here, to see this. It's sad. They're missing out. And you're sad that they're missing out on whatever the life event is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope is a superpower. That's the message from today. I love it.
Yeah.
And you guys offer a lot of hope to a lot of people. And you have so much life to live. You have so much life to give. And I'm just really honored to have both of you guys on today's podcast. I think it's a gift to people what you guys are doing. So this has been really awesome.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you for having us.
If you guys want to listen to Every Widow Thing, you can find it in the link here in our show notes. And hope you guys have an amazing time in Greece.
Thank you. We will.
Bye.